You can hear me. Yeah.
Very cool. Well, thank you very much for showing up.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Pleasure to have you here. I'm just, curious. Let's get started. So we were just talking about the paranormal, and you've been doing this for quite a while now. That's John Constantine. Have you ever had a paranormal experience yourself?
No, the closest thing to any kind of paranormal experience I've had was we were shooting a scene in Atlanta in a mausoleum, and it was the middle of the night because they always like to do night shoots in Constantine. And that one of the ADs came over, and it's a big graveyard, and she came over and she was like, "You never guess, there's a gravestone with Constantine written on it, and it's in the same font as we use in the show." And I was like, "Yeah, right, come on." So I had a little break while they were turning the cameras around, and I followed her off in the dark, into this really spooky graveyard. And there it was. There was a gravestone with Constantine written on it, and then several other gravestones with different, obviously a family of Constantines, and it looked a really similar font to the one we used on the show, and that kind of freaked me out. I mean, we took a photo next to it, which I felt quite bad at the time. But there's this great comic book cover of Constantine sitting next to a gravestone smoking a cigarette with demons' arms coming out. So I tried to kind of recreate that. And then after that, I was just like, let's get out of here, We ran as fast as we could back because it was just a little bit spooky, It was kind of almost synergetic the way that kind of happened, Yeah.
Do people ever come up to you, forgetting that you're just playing a character, and ask for advice on the paranormal?
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes when people say can you do a protection spell on me, and I'm like, I can't remember. Sometimes I can't remember the spells, and you do so many of them in different languages. I don't want to get it wrong and put a curse on you or something. So I'm like, no, I'll just leave that to the work,
You had mentioned at one of the other conventions we were at that a lot of the spells and a lot of the incantations are legitimate incantations that they've given you to do.
Yeah. I mean, on Constantine, we had a consultant who was a real exorcist, and he was consulting with all the writers. And then there was one time I called the writers' room, and I was like, guys, I don't really understand why he's using this kind of spell. And I would always have the translations, the phonetic breakdowns, and a recording of the spells. And sometimes they would actually send a language coach. If it was Latin, I got to grips with the Latin, and I'd done a lot of Shakespeare, so I'd done a little bit of Latin there. But then sometimes it was Arabic, Aramaic, all these languages that take a long time to just learn to pronounce right, let alone remember and know what you're saying, So they would send a language coach or something to help me out. And there was one time I called the writer's room. I was like, guys, why is he using this particular spell? Because the translation kind of doesn't really go with the story. And they were like, that's interesting, let us call the exorcist. And I was like, and they couldn't get a hold of him because he was in Brazil somewhere doing an exorcism. And I just found it I love the fact that detail of the writers were really going there, But also, it was a little bit freaky as well because, you're saying these words, and back in the day, words meant something. As soon as words came out of your mouth and you gave weight to those words, then they meant something. And if I'm doing these curses or cursing myself, there's one episode I put a demon in myself. The demon Pazuzu, who is actually the demon that was used in the film The Exorcist. And I'm doing these real spells, trying to put this demon in me, and I'm like, this is and I'm really trying to mean it as well, to make it as authentic as possible. And I'm really trying to go there. And there's a little bit of me that was a bit freaked out with it. But what was great is the guy who used to do the hair, he was Native American Indian. And he used to bless me and sage me at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day. And I don't know whether that helped, but I hope it did. I'm still here.
Let's find out. The power of Christ compels you! Now, when you're calling in a demon, was that the one time maybe you didn't learn the incantation exactly right?
Yeah, no, do you know, sometimes you do a take and it's a really difficult language, and then it's not just about learning the language and the pronunciation. but then you've got to actually do something with it, you know, actually really try and summon it up. And sometimes you get it wrong, like you get your lines wrong and stuff. And then sometimes they might have used that particular take in the actual final cut. And I'd be a little bit annoyed with that sometimes, because I'd always wanted to try and get it as right as possible, you know. But yeah, no, sometimes I did feel a little, you know, freaked out by some of that stuff. And when I first started doing Constantine, I decided that my mission was to read every single one of the comic books. I still haven't read them all. But I wanted to kind of, I felt like I needed to read them all before I could even take the role on, you know, because it's such an iconic role, and I wanted to glean as much as I could from the comic books. So I read about like 100 of them, and then while we were shooting, I was reading a comic book. I was reading the comics every night before I went to bed. And this is, mind you, after you've shot for like 14, 15 hours, you get home, and then, you know, my reading to go to bed would be, you know, a really dark, twisted demon comic. And I started to have like nightmares quite a lot, and I dream about these demons, and I was like, I have to stop because it's not healthy, you know. So I kind of stopped reading the comics then and just trying to concentrate on the job. And then when we got cancelled, I fell in love with the comics, I really did, and I wanted to continue reading them, but I was so disappointed that the show was cancelled that I just couldn't read them with knowing that I wasn't going to be playing the character anymore. And then when we did Legends of Tomorrow, I started picking them up again, and I went back and I started at the beginning, and I think I've read about 270 of them now. And I'm still reading them now, which is great, but I don't read them before I go to bed.